Hey, how you doing, ladies and gents, girls and boys? Danny Stewart here for BassJapanDirect.com with another Naked Sound review, and today I've got this absolutely stunning and very, very, very rare Atlansia Garland. And if you're not familiar with Atlansia, it's a legendary brand made by the legendary Japanese luthier Nobuaki Hayashi-san, who is also otherwise known as H. Noble. You might have heard of that name in the industry if you own an old 80s or 70s or 80s Aria Pro bass. You might have seen that name on the headstock somewhere. Because he was the chief designer and engineer at Aria Pro 2 in the mid-70s. So he's connected, and he probably also trained people like Harry from from Harry's Engineering, Dragonfly brand, because he started working at Aria in the early 80s as well, probably when Hayashi-san was still there. So Hayashi-san, while he was working on Aria, and he's the one who's responsible for designing those beautiful through-neck basses and some of the more fancy models that they came out with. While he was there developing them, he was also developing his own unique designs, which he later brought out as Atlansia. So I guess he was developing these all the way through, and then in the early 80s he started to release them. Now this is one of the very early ones. It's number 28. It's a 1980 serial number, and it has his signature on the back of the neck heel here, and the date 1980, December 1980 is the manufacture date of this beauty. So it is one of the very early ones, and that's its hard case down there as well. That's a fitted hard case, by the way. And it's all in very, very good condition. So this one is actually in on my Bass Hunter service. It was really hard to find one. I've been looking for one for probably the best part of 6 months, and you know, they don't come up very often at all. So when this one came up, I certainly couldn't let it go, and it was kind of a little bit dirty and very tarnished. I guess it had just been left in its case for a long time. So it needed quite a lot of TLC, but I was very pleased to see that it came out looking pretty much mint after a cleanup. I had to polish up the brass because that was really quite badly tarnished. It looked pretty cool tarnished anyway, because it has a sort of steampunk vibe as it is. But when I looked at pictures of this model, I wondered if that was intentional. But when I looked at all the pictures of this model, they all had just nice clean brass, so it must have been the actual tarnishing and not intentional. So I cleaned it up, had to take everything apart. I oiled it all, did all the maintenance on these grub screws. It's a very, very, very innovative instrument. Each of these saddles has an individual grub screw in the middle, which is notched for the string, and you can turn it clockwise to lower the action or anti-clockwise to raise the action. So it's kind of a little bit like the same principle that you get on the Factor bridge. I don't know if you've ever seen those. And then the nut is the same. You know, we're talking 1980 here, and he's got this brass nut with these, again, it's got saddles in it so that you can raise the action at the nut if you want. I've got it at low. It's a pretty low setting. I think this is pretty much the optimal, and it's very it's very easy to play. Just, you know, it just flows. Although I measured it at the 12th fret, it's 2 millimeters at the 12th fret, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like a breeze, and you know, you can dig in. It's a really different playing experience. The other thing that's special about this is the neck. It's shaped in such a way that the E string side is a lot thicker than the G string side. So it's contoured to kind of, the grip is contoured to fit your hand, as it were. Yeah, I mean, I find that that's quite comfortable, definitely. I can play really fluidly with very little effort, and it's yeah, and it sounds good. Sounds good for slap as well. That was with the tone halfway up. Go full up. Very nice. Yeah. So nice and woolly with the tone down. Very nice. Yeah, it's a different playing experience to your regular sort of jazz bass. You know what I mean? And the radius is quite, it's quite round. That is, I'd say that's probably 7" or so. It's seems to be a little bit rounder than even a normal jazz bass. You know what it reminds me of, and also another detail, if you look at the way the end of the fretboard extends onto the headstock here past the nut, and he's notched it, it reminds me of a double bass or a cello or something. That's what it reminds me of, the neck as well, the feel of it, kind of it doesn't feel necessarily like an electric instrument. You feel like you're playing some kind of orchestral instrument. It's really it's a piece of art. Is what it is. And you know, these things are not cheap. Like, he's still making them. He's still alive and he's still making them. You can go visit his website if you like. It's very interesting. I've linked it below as well if you're interested. And yeah, I mean, you know, this model now is like, this is the passive one. It's like about 580,000 yen. It's about maybe $4,200, something like that. There's an active version as well, in the new range. And the interesting thing is that some of his instruments, this one included, don't have a truss rod. Very much like a double bass doesn't have a truss rod. Or a cello doesn't have a truss rod. No, it's the same. It's interesting, and I think that the truss rod can take away from the resonance or sustain of a neck, and I heard that that is the reason why he doesn't like to use a truss rod. So instead, what he does is he uses very, 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 very thoroughly seasoned wood, straight grained, like quarter sawn, for extra stability. Yeah, I mean, this is from 1980, and like, when you take the strings off, it's slightly convex, and when you put them on, it's just slightly concave. So it's about right, you know. You don't need, it doesn't need a truss rod. It plays just beautifully. It's like it's really interesting. He's got something totally different going on here. It's very unique. Very, very nice. It's a different playing experience, I have to say. So yeah, and this one, you know, the body is solid ash, and you can see that this has different colors on it. Now, I was wondering if that was just aging, but actually that's intentional. I've looked at some of the other ones of this model, other examples that are out there, and they're all similar. They have this oiled, worn look, and then it's glossed, has a gloss top coat on top of it. So that is intentional, and this is actually in like nearly A rank condition for the year as a result. The only thing it has on it which is slight damage is a couple of tiny little marks on the back of the neck here. There's a little bit of cracking in the top coat on the back of the neck, tiny little bit of buckle rash on the back here, and there's a scuff here, but apart from that, it's really, really clean. There's nothing beyond just superficial, barely visible surface scratches on the lacquer. It's nearly mint for the age. It's incredible. But you know, that's you know, I did clean it up a fair bit. Like, you know, I had to take everything apart and bathe them in metal cleaning solution to get rid of the tarnishing. And those that I couldn't take apart, I had to do it kind of painstakingly by hand, bit by bit. But it makes all the difference. And now, you know, I checked against other photographs of this model online just to see if the tarnishing was something that was intentional, because I thought, well, it's got a steampunky look, maybe that was intentional. But every single listing that I found had nice clean brass, so obviously it was the real tarnishing. Maybe forgive me if I already said that. There's a lot to talk about with this. And the other thing that's interesting about this is it's very unique, is that the reason he has these circular pickups is so that you can change the poles if you want to. So this way you can turn them so that they're perpendicular or parallel to the strings, and you can turn them so that they're in phase or out of phase with each other. Now, I haven't really had enough time to experiment with that much, but to me, the difference in sound is subtle. It's very subtle, but it's there if you ever want to use it. So that's very interesting. It's just like, you know, it's a very different way of doing things. And what else do I need to say about this? I think that's about it, really. And for some reason, I don't know why, but on these earlier ones, or the higher grade ones, the tuning pegs are kind of on these brass. They're on these brass insets, and I guess again this might be for resonance and transference. It's fascinating stuff. Of you know, I've only ever touched another Atlansia bass once, and that was an Alien bass, and that was in a shop. It wasn't very well set up. It could have been set up better, but it didn't. It sounded great, but it didn't feel very good because it hadn't been set up properly. But that didn't have these the brass transference inlay.